Hey everybody, today I'm going to show y'all how to use every single input, logic, and output block inside of Wubby. So we're going to start with input blocks with a block touch detector. So basically what this thing does is it detects when a block touches it, specifically an unanchored block, and why is this thing so hard to push? If an unanchored block touches it, it sends a signal. And you can set this to detect anchored blocks or unanchored blocks. And the color to filter thing makes it so that it doesn't detect a certain color if you turn on filter color. That's basically how a block detector works. And its output is the block, or if you put reverse output, then it'll reverse itself. Well, then it'll output itself. Now, the next input block is a click block. This one is pretty easy. It sends a signal whenever it's clicked, and the max distance is the distance that you can click it from. So if I go more than 32 steps away right now, it won't let me click it. But if I increase that to, for example, infinite, then I can click it from anywhere. Now, the next input block is a, what the hell bro, my game crashed. Okay, so the next input block is a frame loop. So basically, this block just sends a signal every time a frame goes through in the game, which is usually somewhere around 60. So 60 times a second, it's just a really fast input thing. I don't know. Okay, humanoid state block. This block is one that I haven't actually used before. But basically, it activates every time something that you set happens to a player. So like, if a player jumps and then lands, and this thing is set to landed, then it would send a signal. The next input block is a key input block. Basically how this works is if it's on mobile and mobile button is enabled, then it'll show a little button in whatever position you put it to, but it's usually around here. Well, its default position is around here. And you can set whatever key you want the person to press for it to send a signal. And that's how that works. Now, an NPC event block. This is pretty much the same thing as a player event block, but it works for NPCs instead. Now, a player chatted block. This block will send a signal every time someone sends a message in the game, like through the chat box. It's pretty simple. A player event block. This thing will send a signal every time a player does something that you set it to do. It's like player join, player left, player respawn, player kills, stuff like that. And player touch detector, this one is really useful for a lot of things. It sends a signal every time you touch it. Well, every time anyone touches it. And a prompt block is pretty much a clicked block. Bro, what the hell? I can't even move my camera with this. Okay. A prompt block is pretty much a click block, but it uses a interact thing instead. Instead of clicking, it uses a prompt. A shop event block is basically if someone buys something in the shop that this thing is set to recognize, then it'll send a signal. And the last of the input blocks, a tap input block. Basically how this works is every time someone presses one of these keys, a jump request would be like trying to jump, a mouse movement would be like moving your mouse, and mouse button 3 would be a middle click, but I'm pretty sure y'all know what the other ones are. And now we're gonna do logic last, because these ones, there's a lot of this stuff. So output. Output is what we're doing next. So basically, attach blocks are set to attach a certain block to you. Okay, so for testing these output blocks, we're going to use a click block to link to it. Oh, by the way, her wiring, it's you just gotta wire stuff. I don't know. Okay, so attach block. This thing, you're gonna set whatever body part you want to weld a block to. And the cooldown is like a cooldown for it doing anything. And the offset is how many studs you want it to go away from wherever the body part you set it to. And the rotation, that one's pretty self-explanatory. And spawn unanchored, you should have that on if you want to attach something to your body in the game. Use time active makes it so that it disappears after the time active. Delete previous blocks is really useful. It just deletes all the other blocks from that body part that you want to attach it to when you attach it. And output clone makes it output the first cloned block that it made. And the block to weld, we're just going to use a normal block to test this. So now, see, now that brings a block to me. Now for the next one. We're doing an attribute changer. So basically how this works is it uses a block that has an attribute on it. For example, we're going to use a damager. So right now, the damager attribute on this block has a cooldown of 3, and it damages you by 15. So basically, what this thing does is you're gonna take the name of the part of the attribute that you want to change, and you're gonna put it in here. And that's just the property thing. For the attribute, you're going to want to put in whatever you have for the attribute. Make sure to remember the capitalization in it, okay? So you have damager, then you have amount, and the destination is whatever block has it. And then these are all the properties for it, but for this, we're using the number property, which we're going to set to 50. So now, I wire this click block and click it. Now this thing would do 50 damage instead of just 15. So that's how that works. Now for the next output block, a camera block. So basically this thing, it sets your camera in the game to a certain position. And the animation time is how long it takes to get to that position. I usually set it to 0. And the target position is wherever you want the camera to go to. So for example, we're going to set that to where this block is. And the target rotation is like which way it's looking. And the use time thing, if you turn it off, then it won't go away from that block unless you do something to cancel it out. But if you do, it will return after a certain amount of time. So now, if I wire this, it'll set my camera to that spot. Then, the next output block is a clone block. This block, basically, first you're going to need a position for it. So set the target position to wherever you want it to put a block. The despawn enabled, basically, is how long it takes for the block it clones to despawn. So we're going to disable that. And the spawn unanchored, that's so that the block it clones is unanchored when it is cloned. The output clone, it does the same thing as attach block. And that's pretty much how it works. But basically, when it's activated, it'll clone any blocks that are no clipping into it, like this. So, there we go. Once it's triggered, it will give you a cloned block. And if you use this command /clean, it'll get rid of all the clone blocks in the world. Then, the next output block is a command block. Basically, what it does is the input thing here it will it would set that value inside of the command block to whatever the value of the input was. So for example, if I put /kill input, you can use input for pretty much anything that uses text. If I use /kill input, it would use the thing that this click block sent, which would be my username since I would be the one to click it. Then it would kill me. Because I set the command to kill. It can be used for any command in the game. Any of these. And now we're going to go to the next output. The next output is message display block, which is good for testing if things work. So basically, what it does, there's quite a few things with this. If it affects everyone, it'll send the message to everyone in the game. It'll show everyone. But if you do specific player, it will only show its message to whatever player is in the input to it. But we're gonna set to everyone for this. The description. Well, okay, so basically, notification makes it so that it shows a It shows a notification on your screen, and the description is what applies to notifications. And the chat, it only shows it inside of the chat. And console, if you press F9, then it'll open the console and it should show it in there. So if I just get rid of all of these, make it output, then okay, never mind. I have no idea how to use console, so we're not gonna worry about that. Okay, so shout makes it so that it shows on your screen and you can set the message color for this one. And the bubble one, it uses the input to figure out what to put the bubble over. It's what you would do if you sent a chat message. It looks like that. So if I did that, it would use the input to send a bubble to go over me, since I would be in the input. And the message time is for how long the message will be displayed. So if we set to 3, by the way, it does not work for bubble, or console, or chat, but it does work for notification, so that would be there for 3 seconds, and it works for shout, so that'd be there for 3 seconds. That's how a message display block works. Now a path block, I've actually never used a path block before, so it's for setting the position for an NPC to walk towards, I think. I've never actually used these before, because I don't use NPCs, but I'm pretty sure it just makes an NPC walk towards whatever place you want it to go to. Now, property changer, I use a little too many of these. Basically, it uses a block, it can have its destination set to anything, to affect that thing. Its animation time is how long it takes to do whatever it's doing. I usually set to 0. Now for this, we're going to set it to position, so that it changes its position. And respect physics makes it so that if it's moving its position or rotation or something, then it will move any players on top of it with it, which is actually kind of buggy, so I usually just turn it off. So vector property, that's the position for it, and all these other properties are for if you did different properties for changing it, and you want to set these to something specific for any of those. But we're using vector property here. And we're going to set that to go 4 studs upwards. So this is just 4 studs more than what's here. So it goes up. And I'm going to actually give this a bit of animation time so you can see it move. So basically, when it gets an input, it will affect whatever block is set as its destination. and it changed whatever property name you set it to with the animation time to whatever property you have in this little bit. Then the next one is a wirer block. I have not actually used these before, but I have experimented with them. So the connect direction is is like which direction you want the wire to go in. The stored one is whatever one you have as the connect to. It doesn't is whatever you have to the direct to. Whatever, I don't know, bro. I don't know what I'm talking about. So for this, we're just gonna use 2 delay gates just for experimenting, you know. And we'll get to delay gates in a minute, okay? So basically, this thing, we're gonna have it go from value to stored. So the value is like what the input is, and the operation will be create. And let's say it wants to connect to this delay gate. And actually we're going to use a different block for this. This thing, wait. Okay, let's use a player touch detector just to experiment with this. This thing, we're going to have it reverse output so that it outputs itself instead of you, or whoever touches it. So basically we're going to have this wire to here so that it triggers. So basically, this player touch detector is going to be the value that's put into here, this wire block. Then that means it'll wire this to whatever it connects to, which would be the stored one. So now, if I touch this, then it'll wire to that. And basically, the remove one, it removes wires, but it only works for ones that it created itself. So basically that's how that works. And the next output block is a wiring variable block, which these ones are really useful actually. So basically, if you want a variable block to only work for blocks that it's wired to, then it just set it to local, but I usually set it to global so that it works for everything. And it create / set is what I usually do, because, yeah, remove is kind of useless, because if you do create / set, it just gets rid of previous ones that have the same name. And basically the value is what is stored in the variable, and the variable name is the name of the variable that it creates. So we're just going to put test here. Basically, I am just going to have a message display block for this that goes into the chat for testing. So basically, you want to make it so that the variable block, if you're making something trigger, like right from the variable block, like right after it activates, you're going to wire the variable block to it so that it still like works with the variable that you made. So if 2 things activate at the same time, they sometimes don't work with the, like, if you want them to go in a certain path, in a certain order. And basically, the title, we're gonna use these little weird pointy parentheses things, and put the title of the variable inside of it, so that it works for that. And on most things, you can use variables for like what you want to do for most properties and something. So we're just going to use test here, and it's going to output the value we're going to put here is just a bunch of random letters. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. Basically, now that we have the variable block wired to that, it's going to create the variable before it goes to the notification, so that the notification can use the variable correctly. Now if we trigger this, it should send a message that uses the variable, right, which is just these random letters that I put. Now, the next one is a world setting changer, which is actually pretty complex to use, because it uses so many specifications and, like, properties. So basically, it uses world settings, which is in here, but for this, we're just going to change the default jump power for testing. So let me just get the name of it. Default jump power. Make sure to remember capitalization in the letters, okay, or it won't work. So for the setting name, we're gonna put default jump power. And then, once we have the setting name in it, I don't know how to use input. Basically, once you have default jump power in here, that's basically the setting we're going to be changing for this example. And the number property is what we're using for that, since the default jump power uses a number. So we're going to set that to 100, just to double it for testing. Basically, I'm gonna wire this to here. And right now my jump power is 50, but once this is triggered, that changes your jump power, the default jump power, to 100. It should double that once I click this. See, now I jump higher. So if I just change this back to normal. Now the next one is a zone changer. This one is the only one that uses zones, which I don't really use that often. So basically, to select a zone with it, for it to change, you're gonna want the zone to be like inside of it. So for this example, we are just gonna use a zone that no clips into the zone changer, so that the zone changer affects it. And see, we're using a physics zone for this example. So basically, we're gonna set it. It's this thing right now. If you go into it, basically I'm gonna get it to change your gravity when you go in. Right now it's at the default amount. But basically for this, we're gonna make it so that it changes the it changes the gravity. See, gravity. And basically the animation time is how long it takes for that to be affected. We're just going to set it to 0. And the properties are basically the same as property changer things. But the number property, we're going to set to 50. So it's a bit lower than the default. So now, this thing, when it's activated, it's going to change this zone here to have this gravity at 50. So when I trigger this, then when I go in, it should... Okay, I'm sorry, I'm stupid. I don't know how to use, like, zone changers. We're just gonna go into the next thing, okay? Ah, what did I just do? Okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and lock this so I don't delete it. Okay, anyways, we're done with the output blocks. I'm sorry that I didn't know how to use a zone changer. I don't have experience with those. But now we're on to logic gates. So we're gonna start from the start of the menu all the way to the end of it. So we're gonna go with a set stat gate. So basically a set stat gate is it uses a username as an input to recognize what player to affect. And we're going to do stat add test. So now it's going to set whatever stat you set to put in here. And its value is going to be 1 as an example to set your set to 1. And you can set it to subtract that amount or add that amount. We're going to set it to add. And if it sets it in, it'll like directly set it to that. And I'm actually going to make this thing's activation time lower, just to make it easier to use. Okay, so basically, when this thing's activated and it uses my username as an input, then it will set my stat, or since I set it to add, it will add 1 with the test stat. And since I set that as a name, then I press this, it'll add 1 to my stat right up here. So I can just like keep on doing that. Now the next thing is a get stat gate, which basically it uses a username as input. And basically, you set the stat name to see what stat to get the amount of. And if their username is the input in it, then it will take their amount of that stat and replace it as the input. So we're going to use a message display as a test here. So here we go. It's at 13 because my stat is at 13. Now the next thing is a text editing gate, which uses... Okay, so text editing gates are like... They edit the text inside of a text storage gate, which, I guess we're doing text storage now. Text editing, if you do disable output, it will only edit the text in here, but will not make it output from here. But we're not going to use that, because we're not having anything wired to this. So, I don't know what all the things here do. I usually just use set. With value, we're going to set to a bunch of random letters. I don't know. If the thing is set to storage, then it will change what's in there. That's how that works. And since we already used text storage, we'll get to that in a minute. Text input, basically, it makes so that when you wire this to here, and it uses username as input to put some stuff on here. Basically, when you do that, it will output whatever you put in there. And, yeah, that's pretty much how it works. I don't know the other stuff here because I don't really use this. But the next one is text storage. We already use this, but here's how it works. Basically, we're going to use a notification thing as a test. So, basically, when an input goes through here, when an input goes through anything into the text storage, it will replace the signal with whatever it's storing in there. So, see there it says sample text. Now the next thing is a get game property, which basically, oh, oops, I didn't mean to place that. Basically, it gets any of these properties from something in the game. You can use any of these, but we're going to use number of players for the example. And the value here is for if you did something like number of players on team, then, for example, the value would be what the team name is. But basically, we're going to use this as an example for number of players. So that should output 1 since there's 1 player in the lobby. And that's me. So now, we're just going to delete these. So the next block is a get NPC property, which basically, I haven't actually used these before, but its destination is a NPC block, so that it knows like what NPC to go to, and it gets any of these properties from like what the NPC is doing or something. And we're not testing this because I don't have any NPCs and I'm not placing any. Get player property gate. Basically, it uses a player name as an input and gets any of these properties from what's happening to them or what they're doing. Like any of these. But we're going to use display name for this. So now, if I use a message display as an example, this thing is going to wire to that, and it should output my display name, which is Fatal Squish. And it's supposed to do that. Now, the loop through everyone gate. This one is pretty useful if you want to have it so that, like, it goes through all players, but, like, it still has everyone's usernames in it. So basically, whenever it's activated, it will go through everyone with the active time being however long... Oh, I did not mean to open that. With however long it's going to stop at each player, and the delay is how long it waits between going to another player. So if I set these both to 0.06, well, if I set the delay, it's still going to be separate inputs, so it's going to be fine. So basically, for each player it goes through, it's going to be active for whatever amount of time you set here. The delay is how long it waits until going to the next player. So, if I do this, it would only go to me since I'm the only player here. But anyways, the next one is a repeater gate. This one is pretty interesting, because if there's nothing wired to it, and it's set to constant on the loop type, then it will constantly loop using the active time and the delay, kind of like the loop through everyone. The ignore deactivation, I usually just keep that on, so that it keeps going. And the repetition makes it go from the start index to the finish index, which is how many times it's going to loop once it's wired to. And enumerated goes to... basically it's kind of the same as repetition. I don't know the difference between these, but yeah, that's how it works. Next one is a delay gate, my personal favorite, for using like delays and stuff for gaps with variables. And the delay is, however, basically, this thing will delay a signal for however long you set in here, and then it'll send the signal through with the same value. And if it has to be activated, if this ignore deactivation is off, then it has to be active throughout the entire amount of time that it goes through. So basically, I have this thing set its activation time to 0.06, which means it would not go through long enough to get through this delay gate. So if I pressed it, it wouldn't get through for long enough. But if I set this to ignore deactivation, then it would keep delaying the signal and go through even once this deactivates. So if I press it now, after 1 second it'll go through. Now the next one is a player owns pass gate, which basically it figures out if a player owns a world pass or a gear with the ID of it. I've never actually used this before, so I don't know how to figure out the ID of the stuff. But basically, it only goes through if they own that. If they own that pass. And prompt for Roblox item goes for any pass in any Roblox game, or a avatar item. And it uses the ID of that pass or avatar item to go through to figure out like which one it is. And the triple math gate, I'm actually sorry, y'all. I don't know how to use a triple math gate. I'm sorry. The next one is a number storage gate. It's pretty much the same as a text storage gate, but it uses numbers instead. And a number setter gate is basically the same thing as a text editing gate, but it's for number storage. But the thing about number setter gates is that you can use RNG. So if you do, for example, I did 1, comma, then 100, make sure you add the comma there, or else it won't work. And the disable output does the same thing as text editing. So basically now, if this goes through into a number storage gate, then it'll like randomize what number it goes to. So if I press this, now it's going to like a bunch of... Every time I click this, it goes to a random number here. So now, a math gate, basically it takes a number input. Well, it's okay, yeah. The input to value or value to input is like the order it would go in, and the operation type is what it does with the math. And the next gate type is whatever. A normal gate type would be like it gets a number, and it outputs a number after it does the math equation with it. And storage, it basically takes a number inside of the number storage gate, and it does the math with that, and then goes through. We're gonna set this to storage, for example, and it's gonna add 1 from input to value. Honestly, yeah, that doesn't really matter. But basically, every time this goes through now, since we set it to storage, it's gonna add 1 to whatever we have inside of the number storage gate. See? Now it's adding 1. And the next one is a bool switch gate. I haven't actually used bool stuff before, but it's probably pretty simple. A boolean switch, it basically just like switches whatever is like on or off inside of a bool storage. And basically this is like false or true stuff. And the boolean switch, if we get this here and the bool storage here, then every time this goes through, it should switch that to the opposite. And a bool setter, basically it just like sets the bool storage inside of a boolean storage to whatever this boolean setter is to, which we're gonna set to true for this. See, that sets it to true. That's how boolean stuff works. Now, if gates and AND gates are my favorite ones to use. They work really good. So basically, this thing, an if gate, when a signal is sent into it, it will only let the signal through if the signal is equal to whatever it has inside of it. So for example, we're going to set this to my username. So if equal to Fable Squish, then it'll go to a message display. We're going to wire these. So if it's equal to Fatal Squish, it'll go through, since that's my username. But if I set this to something else, then it won't go through because it's not equal to 834. Now the next one is an AND gate. Basically, this one requires every single thing that's wired to it to be activated at the same time for it to send a signal. And the last thing that is wired to it will be what it outputs. So if I get like two player touch detectors, for example, I just got 2 of these, then a message display block to see that it went through. And we wired both of these player touch detectors to that. If I pressed only one, it'll only go through with one of them. But if both of them were active at the same time, then it would go through and send a message because it's wired to a message display. Now, the next thing is a break gate. So basically, break gates are for repeater gates, which are like, we're going to set this to repetition. The finish index is going to be 100, activation time 0.5, delay 0.5, so it goes so basically, now I set this at whenever it's activated, it will go, it will send a signal once per second, 100 times. So let's wire that. So now that would go, we're going to do a message display that is going to just put, like, I don't know, a bunch of random letters. We're gonna wire this to here. So when this is pressed, it'll start just repeating that 100 times, since I set it to repetition and its finish index is 100. No, that's just going. But when a break gate is put onto it, like when a break gate is activated, when it's wired to a repeater gate that is going with something that requires activation, and the break gate is activated, then it'll just like stop it from doing that, and it'll like just stop the repetition. So that's how that works. Now, a NOT gate is basically a thing that is always sending a signal at all times unless there's a signal being sent into it. So basically, it's like inverted. If there's nothing going into it, it will go through, but if there is something going into it, then nothing will go through. And a XOR gate will send a signal only if the number of inputs that's sent into it is a odd number of an amount. So if we get a message displayed here, since this would be one signal going through from the click block, then it would be an odd number. Since 1 is an odd number, it would go through, because it's an odd number of amount of signals. Now the next one is a OR gate, which will basically which will send a signal if anything on it, if any signal on it is active at the time, it will send a signal through. So it's I don't know, bro. It's pretty much just that. It sends a signal through if something's going through it already. Then now we're going on to the full block logic things. These are more complex stuff. So basically, a break vector block, we need a vector input for this, which for that, we're going to go early with a change signal block. So basically, a change signal block is you set its property to output like whatever kind of thing you want to output. For this, we're going to set it to vector, which is a like coordinates kind of thing. We're just going to set this to like something completely random. I don't know, bro. And then when a signal goes through it, it will output like whatever kind of thing you want to output, and with whatever value you put for that thing. And now with a break vector block, it basically gets whatever part of a coordinate you want it to get, and it breaks off that coordinate and outputs that only. So we're going to use a message display block with that. So basically this thing is going to output this change signal is going to output a vector property, and right here the y coordinate is this really big number. So this thing is going to break off the y coordinate and only output that into the message display. So it's going to output the number that I put into here for the y coordinate, because this broke off the y coordinate and outputted it. Now the next thing is going to be a build color block. I have actually never used these before, but basically it just takes I don't even know what I'm doing, bro. This block, I'm sorry y'all, I've never used this block before and I don't know how to use it, so we're gonna exclude that one. A build vector block is pretty much the same as a build color block, but it's for like coordinates instead. A color operations block, I've never used this before either, I'm sorry. And a get block property, this is pretty useful. We're gonna put it right here. So basically, its destination is whatever block you want its destination to be, which we're just gonna set to that. And the property name, we're going to set this to position. So it gets the position of wherever this block is and outputs that into the message display. We're going to get rid of the change signal because we don't really need that. And so basically now, if we wire this to here and this to here, this thing is going to get the position of this block, and then it's going to output that into here. And it's going to output its position into here. I don't know what's going on with the z coordinate, but okay. So basically now, if you want it to output like whatever block it was inputted with, then just don't have any destination on it, and the value of it has to be a block. And the next one, wait, actually there is no next one. That's all of them. And in the next video, I will go over special blocks. Goodbye, everybody. Thanks for watching the video. Let's delete this click block.